Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast, and I'm very excited to bring you guys an incredible guest to talk about the future of something that's really exploding lately, this AI art craze and all of the things that come with it. It connects to so many different things, and I think I have just the man for the job to talk about it, Mario Garza and his show Symbolic Studies, which you have to check out immediately. He's got these wonderful succinct shorts but full of knowledge nuggets that you're just going to love. He has a super professional demeanor, and his presentation is pretty much second to none. So, Mario, welcome to the show. Give everyone an idea of where they can find you and what you do.
Right on, George. Thanks for having me. Yeah, you can find me at symbolicstudies.com. I'm all over the place, but that's probably the easiest location just to find where I'm at on social media and everything else. But I focus on symbolism. So a lot of my content up until now has been based on astrology, the myths, and the archetypal symbolism of astrology, things like that. And so if you're into that, you guys will like my channel. But I am switching gears a little bit. I'm going to be focusing on longer form content kind of moving forward. But yeah, this is a project I've been, working on for the last couple of years, and I'm meeting lots of interesting people, having lots of very interesting conversations with others as well. So this is going to be a great chat. This topic is really fascinating for all sorts of different reasons. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward just to getting into it with you.
No, same here, man. The same here. And just the nature of what it's called, it already brings to mind so many different things. The idea
Mhm.
of artificial intelligence and where its roots come from, things like DARPA and things of that nature. But I think what would be best to start with is, what does AI art mean for the art world in general, especially because it has literally exploded lately in this particular year, 2022?
It has, right, exactly. I had to take notice of it, I would say late spring, early summer. I noticed that it was coming across my feed. A lot of creators that I was following started creating AI artwork, and I just couldn't ignore it because I've been an artist my whole life, but professionally, I've been doing graphic design work for the last 20 years. And so I was curious from that angle how it might change my career and if I should even be employing it as an example, as a tool, because I do see that there are lots of things associated with it that could be helpful. But how is it changing art? That's a great question. I think there's going to be a lot of people in the future who maybe never touch a paintbrush or a crayon or a pencil. They may never pick
Wow.
up photography or a real instrument or something like that. I think that AI art, it's very entertaining to do. That's one thing that I noticed immediately when I started playing around with it, is that I was hooked in for a couple of nights, and I was thinking about different prompts throughout the day. And once I was done with
Right.
it, and I've heard people mention this, that they get hooked. I know a friend, actually, he's not a visual artist per se, he's actually a writer, but he saw opportunities with AI art to create his book covers, which is really interesting
Wow.
too, because he hired me to do a few of his book covers
Right.
previously. You know
Right.
what I mean? So there are a lot of people who are thinking that this is really going to change like commissioned work and freelance opportunities and things like that. And I certainly see that being the case, but I think there's still going to be room for people to do commissioned artwork and things like that. The same way, obviously DJs and having turntables and things like that, they're pressing a button and, people are going nuts and there's thousands of people, at a venue or whatever, but there's still lots of bands doing their thing. You
That's
know what
right.
I mean? And so I think that maybe doing things the traditional way, the organic sort of maybe analog kind of way, I think it'll always be there. But there's obviously there's a landscape shift right now with everything. And so for me, the biggest thing that kind of breaks my heart a little bit is just thinking about people never having the opportunity to really create things, maybe from their own imagination, using their own creativity, which is a very therapeutic process.
Right.
You learn about self that way. And I think there's so much to gain from creating things, flexing that imaginative, imaginative. What am I saying here? Um,
Imaginative. Yeah, that's it. I had to think about it
okay,
too, actually.
that's really funny. But flexing that muscle, is so important. And so
Right.
I've gained so much from that over the years, that I kind of feel for maybe the generation that isn't really going to have that opportunity. And actually, I was thinking about it too. It's like there's so many school districts and schools that have slowly but surely taken away the arts,
That's right.
no longer having musical programs and things like that. But I could see some of that stuff being substituted for an iPad, you know. So
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
And it is. A
What
lot of people do bring that to school. What are you going to say?
I was just going to ask you, what you think about everything.
Oh, yeah,
What
yeah,
are
right.
your initial thoughts with
Um,
how it's going to change art, in the future?
right, right. Well, it's a lot like the autocorrect in texting. A lot of people don't know how to spell words anymore. And even I even find myself like, wait a minute, some words do look kind of weird on paper, especially in the English language. And every so often you have to double check because you don't write it down all the time now. I actually end up doing a lot of handwriting for these show notes, which it helps me keep my chops up. I used to write little stories out all the time when I was very little. And the art of writing is an art form. It is like art in its own way. So everything you said rings true. I can see this being a very fast decline of it's just what they want, isn't it? It's just what they want. They want you to use less of these faculties of your mind so you can become whatever like you do. And this seems to be a big part of it. AI is not often used to our own benefit. And every time it's being talked about, it's some kind of algorithm that's being used against you or being used as a way to steal your data. And this could be a humongous way to steal your data, or at least it might be a way for them to keep track of where your mind is at. If some people are making certain kinds of images that don't vibe with the current mindset, that information is there. You can't sign up for one of these things without putting all your information in. You have to. You can't just go use one right now. You're right. You have to. Am I right about that? You have to pretty much put all your info in.
I believe so. Yeah. I
I
know
believe
there's
so.
lots of different types of apps out there, so I can't say for certain, but yeah, I think so. And it's grabbing your data on a few different levels. So you're talking about it from maybe the user side of things, but also these apps and these programs, my understanding of how they work is that it crawls the internet for
Mhm.
source material, images and whatnot.
Right.
And the programmers and people who are working on these things, they know where some of this material is coming from. There's a huge database full of it, and it's completely full of people's original artwork and
Right.
photography. I've heard there's like medical records in there. I've heard there's all sorts of different things in there, because if you can put in any prompt, it wants to know what a medical record would look like. It wants to know what all of
Right.
these random nuanced sort of things look like. And so there's a possibility, as an example, that we have personal photographs or we have personal artwork that are being used for this information data mining kind of exercise to feed this AI. And so I know that that's actually a big concern for a lot of people, is that if they're going to be pulling data from a set of imagery, that data, that imagery that they're pulling from, there should be some sort of consent to there that I'm okay with this kind of happening or
Sure.
whatever. And so they're pulling so much stuff from the internet that there's no telling really where it's all coming from. So there is a data thing, situation, conversation to be had on multiple levels with what's going on here. And obviously, this is how the AI is actually doing its thing.
Right. Right. And everyone, I think that's worth mentioning that growing up with video games, I knew what AI was. I didn't know how deep and dark it was when I was younger, but it was a part of how they advertised certain games as they were getting more advanced. The AI reads how you act, and it works. It works with you, and it learns you, and then the game gets more fun and challenging because of it. And then when The Matrix comes out in 1999, I had a friend that I went to see it with said, "Artificial intelligence, can you believe it? I didn't even know what is AI." And like, you don't know what
Mm,
AI. I couldn't believe that somebody didn't know what AI was. It
mm,
wasn't that popular of a term yet, and that's all part of the thing that they keep it on the wraps with. I'm sure it's people think it's magic, that these binary machines are magically producing things out of nowhere. One of the first red flags that this isn't some completely random thing is that you get recognizable things that sort of have like a vibe to them. You sort of get used to seeing what you see, and they're getting things that you recognize right away. It wouldn't
hmm
make sense if it didn't. If you ask for a bus and you didn't get a bus, then the thing's not working right. But I think that actually has to do with something that I found through researching this called symbolic AI. No pun intended that it's your show name too, but it has to represent something that humans recognize. So the prompts can't just do anything. There is a rigid construct to it. The code isn't just turning your words into something. The code is then probably taking what it gets and manipulates it to be more of what you're expecting to get, I guess
Mm,
is the best way to say it.
hmm
What do you think
hmm
about that?
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. That makes a lot of sense for sure. Um, what's going on too, because you mentioned video games, is this is just, we're talking about visual images right now with
Mhm.
artificial intelligence, right? And then it's debatable whether or not it's actually technically AI. There's a conversation there. And I know people in real life where using the word AI inappropriately drives them nuts. And they're like, none of this stuff is AI,
Right, right.
and I'm like, I understand where you're coming from, right? But
Sure.
that is the term that everyone is latching onto right now. It's also too possibly a like a buzzword. It's like a marketing word,
Yes. Yes.
sort
Good
of
point.
thing, right? And so it's really interesting because we're talking about visual images right now, but where it's heading, this is just a small stepping stone in a larger trajectory. There already is really AI like movie sort of software,
Right.
AI video game software. And so I was listening to some people talk about this, prepping for the show, and they're saying that what they kind of envision in the future is AI creating your whole video game experience. And so, based on every prompt that you've ever put into anything, it'll know exactly what George wants to see and how he wants to play his game, and
Right.
all of the things that really are going to make him go and make him have a great experience within this artificial environment. And because it's AI, some of the details are going to be so nuanced, but they're going to be absolutely, completely tailored to your interests and how you see everything. And so, this is just the beginning of a lot of different things coming down the road. In this same conversation, I thought it was really fascinating that people were talking about, what if let's just say I'm a freelancer, right? So I've
Right.
worked for a lot of different companies over the years. What if I had a really unique style, as an example,
Right.
and I worked for some large company and I created an ad campaign or I created a series of, original works of art for their business for some ad or whatever. Let's just say that contract ended. What's going to stop them from using that source art and creating even more artwork that's in my style without me getting paid to do any of it?
Oh yeah.
So the applications and the potential for how it's going to be used down the road, I think, is actually really, really wild. I don't know if people realize this, but you can actually just type in a prompt. People who have used this will know, but you can just type in like, I want a dog in the style of Van Gogh or
Right.
Picasso, or you can type in a director's name and say, I'm trying to create this scene, but I want it to look like a Tim Burton movie or something
Right.
like that, and there's so much information that this AI has gathered that it actually does a pretty decent job, depending on your prompt, in recreating that. And so, it'll be fascinating to see what happens within the next 10 years with all of
For
this
sure.
stuff.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that then you're suddenly ripping somebody off, but you're not, and it's okay, I guess. Yeah, falls into under the cracks possibly, and that's dangerous in a certain way. But yeah, what is stopping them from imitating you? If you imitate Andy Warhol, I think it's pretty obvious, and you can't really get away from that style. That's a
Right.
great point, and I want to mention that there's always, how that stupid little phrase, there's an app for that. Well, there's always a movie for that, and I'm
Mm.
thinking Total Recall. He shows up, they make a game world for him to enter, and suddenly he's on Mars doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And
Right.
this has already happened. And with the way Google behaves, the way social media takes everything from you, you might not even need to tell them who you are, the game. You might be able to just log in and it automatically makes this perfectly tailored game based on the entirety, the Internet of Things kicks in, and your entire history is turned into a video game
Exactly
with
right.
even with familiar family images and other stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, that's
Who
right.
knows?
Did you
That's
ever see
scary.
the movie? It's called Ex Machina or Ex Machina by chance?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things in that film is that this character is approached by a robot,
Right.
and based on his search history in his browser, they made the ideal woman for him. And so they knew exactly what would get him going, the right proportions, the right look, color, hair, the type of everything about it, you know. And so they created this robot woman who was an AI as well. And she was custom made for him, which I think is really interesting too. And you brought up the whole idea of, you know, duplicating you or whatever, mimicking you.
Right.
We're getting, you know, this conversation is relevant when we're discussing deep fakes, you know, and things like
Yeah.
that. And they literally can. So, I mean, from how you look to how you speak to what you would actually say, you know, AI is affecting everything right now. And so there are script writing tools that are basically AI. You plug in a subject, maybe where you
Right.
want it to go, and it'll take care of everything for you. Obviously, there's a bunch of different apps where you can deep fake, you know, a
Yeah.
celebrity, you know,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever.
And
And so
easily.
very easily now, exactly. And so one of the things I always think about with all this stuff is when I was playing around with it, I was really blown away at the quality of the artwork that I was seeing. And I couldn't believe how quickly it worked and what it was producing and in the ways of which you can even refine the artwork too. Um,
Right.
and so I was just really taken aback by this quality and just kind of like where it currently is. And you can use it on your phone, you can use it in your browser. You don't need to download any software. It's all done in the cloud, right? And it just
Right.
got me thinking, I'm like, if this is what's accessible to us, then, you know, what are the intelligence agencies of the world or what's Hollywood? How have they been using it for years? You know, things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my hunch is that if we have it, you know, what they actually have behind closed doors, maybe in whatever black budget sort of like projects and things like that, like what's going on the underground that we're not privy to just yet. You know, what's happening there with AI? My guess
Right.
would be it's completely nuts.
I couldn't agree more. That's how it always goes. You know, they bring in these little simple things for you to play around with. They see how people interact with them and they get better at those. And they're already improving their own stuff that you've never seen yet. Not
Mm-hmm.
even, not even far fetched in the slightest bit. And
Mm-mm.
I recall the Pong when Pong came out, it's the same thing. That game was so nothing. Anyone could play it. Anybody. And is that the best they could do at the time? I really doubt it, you know, but they managed to get you to bring a console into your home. And I think that's a big factor for all of this. Nowadays, we got the phone. That's the thing in the past. But back then, it was a big deal for someone to agree to buy this electronic thing, bring it home and put
Mm-hmm.
it on your TV, you know? And
Right.
now that
Yeah.
you mentioned the, you know, the idea of creating something around you, your search history, and it makes this female robot, this fembot, it could be used against you in a court of law. Who knows? Say we see you have very conspiratorial minded prompts in your AI art, Mr. Johnson. I think that can go
Mm-hmm.
in a pretty nasty way too. Don't want to make this an awful thing, but there are some negative things coming up from this. And something that I want to mention is that this is like any interactive entertainment. It makes you think that you're in control 100% and you're barely in control of 10% of it. You know, you're using it and it does what it's supposed to do. It helps. That's part of the magic. It helps you feel like you're in, you know, you're having a great time on your own and I'm in control of all this fun stuff. Look at what I did today. Look at my art that I did today. You know,
Yeah.
you type some words in. This is what happened. And I don't want to bring it down. There's obviously going to be some useful things for it. That guy's making book covers. That's cool. But then
Mm-hmm.
then maybe you have one less job that month and that's
Yeah.
not cool. And that happened to me as a musician when people were showing up and letting the background go while they play guitar only. Bass players don't get a lot of work as a result of that. It happened. Of course, bands still happen, but it's
Right.
harder for them to get the money. And if one
Yeah.
guy shows up, he's getting paid what a full band is getting paid. So why wouldn't you do that? There's incentives, and that's a big issue. But robots are not going to have the capacity for love and all these other things that come with art and
Right.
your own experiences and your evolution, so to speak. And I use that word, you know, in a certain way, a little lightly. But do you
Yeah.
think you kind of touched on it, but maybe just a more direct answer? Do you think that this could, if this keeps going in the trajectory that it looks like it's going in,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that real artists, and I put that, you know, real artists like yourself, do you think that you'll be more valuable? Because it seems like you may be.
I think that possibility is there. Yeah, I feel like that could be one of the silver linings down the road, right? And so if everyone is just used to, you know, being on their phone and being behind a computer, and doing things, the digital way, the quick way,
Right.
the expedient way, I could see there being a case where people who are doing things in a more traditional way, the more analog way, yeah, they are more valuable. It's really interesting too, because right now we're going through this really interesting thing, right? At the moment, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I know this is the case in the West Coast, at least. There's a lot of businesses that are having a hard time finding employees. They
Oh,
just
it's
they
very much here.
and so I've heard so many different stories like this. A contractor who can't find people who want to work, basically.
Hmm.
So if you want a new roof or carpet or something like that, depending on where you live, it might be like months before you can get someone out there. I had a friend who was paving a driveway. No matter who they called, they
Yeah.
couldn't find somebody who wanted to pave their driveway, and I live not too far away. I'm like an hour east of Portland, Oregon. But
Right.
just finding employees to wash dishes and to like cook and to do things like that, to actually show up physically for a job, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to find these people. And so now there's a lot of companies that are offering huge incentives for somebody who actually wants to show up to a real job,
Definitely.
and
Definitely.
so I could see this being the case. A plumber or someone who actually has like the skills physically to do things. I see their value going up and up like year after year, honestly, right now, because
Definitely.
everyone else is doing something online. There's so many streamers out there, and there's so many
Right.
different hustles that people have on the internet, that actually finding somebody to do traditional work like this, I think that, yeah, that is just going to become more valuable, including, maybe artists and things like that.
And I hope so. I
Yeah,
genuinely hope so for sure. And that brings up I'm going to bring up a little picture here because I saw
sure.
something came up on my feed. I don't remember where I was or how I saw it, but it was offering a job essentially. Oh, here it is. Yeah. This whole, hey, become an AI artist. The jobs are already being offered. I'm not
Mm,
sure how it works, what the pay rate is, or anything along those lines, but this is like a right now thing. And everything seems to be infiltrated by this at this point. And it happened really, really fast, which is the
mhm.
kind of thing that makes me suspicious of it at the same time. That's usually where I'm at. If something just suddenly explodes out of nowhere, like this too, make your whole D&D story. This comes right back to you saying kids aren't going to use crayons anymore. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to have something make your D&D campaign for you. This isn't the point of all this. I don't quite get it. And I think that, not to divert, but I was thinking but I think you mentioned it the last time we talked, that 2001 Space Odyssey. Remember
Yeah.
what happened with the AI there? Hal, that not necessarily a good thing. And in relation to that, of course, I was going to sign up for one of these AI art things,
Hmm.
and the placeholder company was SpaceX, and SpaceX.com was the domain. So I'm not even remotely surprised that these things are connected.
Yeah.
But it's just a side note there because, man, it's coming quick, this whole thing. And you go ahead because I think I can. That's enough.
Yeah, no, no, dude, you're absolutely right. It is coming quick. And I guess what I think about too, I don't want to demonize technology, basically,
Good.
but there is absolutely a correlation with the amount of technology we're all being exposed to, especially the younger generation, and mental health issues, emotional health issues, spiritual issues, things like that, right? And so this is something that I just can't ignore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there is a direct relationship with how much people scroll, and spend time on their phone, on
Yes.
TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, everything else. And it is one of these things where I think technology seeks to drive a wedge between everything. It wants to be the mediator between everything, between relationships, how you do business, how you create art or music or anything else like that. Technology is really great at finding its place in between everything, any kind of transaction. That's kind of how I tend to see it. So, as an example, right now, obviously, we're talking through technology, right?
Sure.
This wouldn't have been possible however many decades ago.
Right.
Um, but I'm just noticing, and I think it's pretty obvious that there is a cause and effect situation going on here. So as convenience with technology, becomes more and more abundant in our lives,
Right.
at what cost? You know what I mean? What are we losing then? being inside, being exposed to blue light, being exposed to EMF frequencies all the time,
Yeah.
being exposed to all of the different ads and information that we all see on a daily basis. I was reading an article years ago, and it was saying like the average person, I think it was maybe like 100 years ago, or even maybe a little bit further than that. The amount of information they consumed in one lifetime, it was just minuscule compared to how much information we're all exposed to all the time now.
Yes.
So you log on, you're going to see dozens of ads. You're going to see just so many different links. You go to YouTube and you're going to be hit with all these different thumbnails, and so I'm just kind of acknowledging that technology, as it creeps into our lives, we're going to see more and more mental, emotional health issues and things like that. And I know that right now there's a whole wave of young artists that are very distraught over this AI thing. That was one of the interesting things I
Wow.
came across prepping for the show,
Yeah.
is that there are multiple videos of artists who are basically saying that they're throwing in the towel, that they're quitting because AI is so good that there's no possible way that they can compete with it. And so why even try, essentially? So
Right.
there's people out there that are encouraging people like, no, just because this is coming, continue to refine your craft, continue to do your
Right.
thing, and there's all of these kind of like emotional support groups right now, of artists kind of coming together to talk about this AI thing and, the merits of it and what they should do about it and everything else. So, the implications, I see them kind of everywhere, but
Yeah.
I'm
Me
just
too.
kind of noticing this even with my own like family, my nieces and nephews and things like that. And they're just a different breed because they grew up with technology in a way that I didn't necessarily, right? So
Yeah.
from the get-go, they had broadband internet, they had tablets, they had cell phones, all these different things. And that's cool to a certain extent, but getting out in nature and kind of understanding your body and just knowing how reality works and not needing to be constantly stimulated and
Right.
using your brain and everything else, obviously there's benefits to doing all of that the old school way.
Sure. And there's benefits to the powers that should not be if you don't do it. So even just rudimentary yoga, time for yourself to think, or even less than that, even just meditating can
Mm-hmm.
really do a lot for you. You find yourself, and I know that sounds so hippie and cliche, and it's so true. And everything you said
Absolutely.
is perfect about that. It is, it's there. We're not going to stop it now, but it would do us well to find a way to moderate, especially with the youth, because it
Mm-hmm.
seems like the only thing to do. And it's hardly the only thing to do. No matter where you live, it's like, oh, there's nothing to do here. Like, there's at least some kind of nature preserve or something you can go to at the very least. And that can be a very rewarding experience to have time, with yourself or with somebody you love. It's something that will hopefully not go away, because a lot of those dystopian movies show that there is nothing to do once you get to that point. So we gotta hope that our phones are not the last resort and only empower us. But as long as Google is there, it's tough. There's no
Right.
denying that also. But
Exactly.
I wanted to mention in the Ray Kurzweil book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, he mentions the law of time and chaos, and I think we're in the law of increasing chaos. As chaos goes up, the time between salient events also increases. In other words, less important things happen, and they happen farther apart from each other. It's not a boom of awesome things happening one after the other. Do you think that we're in that position right now with the AI art? It seems to have boomed, and maybe it's going to kind of sit where it is for a little bit before anything changes. What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've heard it be called kind of like a quickening sort of thing.
Oh yeah,
I
quickening.
don't know if that's
Yep.
the same sort of idea, but it sounds
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
is, and this also too, it's something that I've thought about for years. It'll come to me. There's a book that discusses this, and
Hmm.
essentially it's like the more and more information that's put out there, like I think about the 24-hour news cycle, right?
Right.
It gets people all stirred up, and it makes people anxious, essentially, and then there's this feeling that you can't keep up with current affairs, and that, oh my god, the sky is falling and things like
Yeah.
that, and so it really is this kind of tornado. And so I do see it kind of going faster and faster, and that's what technology does. There's even a rule of technology where it like doubles, increasingly at a more exponential rate, And so yeah, absolutely, I definitely see that's going on, and I think that's partly why too these younger people who are on their phones and on social media and everything else, I think that's why they're prone to depression and anxiety and everything else, because it's too much to keep up with. You can't keep up with the internet. The internet's going to win every single time. And
Right,
so
right.
there's always going to be this fear of missing out or what have you. And so finding this balance with everything, I think, is going to be more crucial kind of moving forward. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I maybe had one or two other things to mention, but I think we should move on to what I was truly inspired by here, because this whole thing came up because my very good old friend, Mike, you know who you are if you're watching, he sent me an article that really got me thinking about all this stuff even more than I already was, because I see it, some of the people I know are using it. The advertisements that I just showed keep popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an ABC News article about this character, we'll call it a character, a cryptid, they're calling it, named Loeb, who apparently happened, beyond their knowledge of how it could have happened. It's not supposed to be this way. And the images are very interesting. And I think it's going to pertain to a lot of the things we just said.
Yeah.
But maybe as a way to kind of turn this into an first half, second half episode, I wrote down a quote from Richard Wagner, who was this German composer in the mid 19th century that, you love to hate him. He's not a nice guy. He may have helped bring in everything that people know of Germany from the early 20th century through the culture, through the art. This can happen. But the reason I want to mention him is because he wrote a book called The Artwork of the Future. And
Mm.
again, this is the mid 19th century. So he had this concept called Gesamtkunstwerk, which is the total artwork. And he didn't simply want to make an opera and then let somebody else write it out and somebody else do the set and somebody else do the clothing. He did everything himself, total artwork. And it's a beautiful concept. It's the kind of thing where AI art would be the complete opposite, I would say, which is another reason I'm thinking about this stuff right now. But he was a genius in a lot of regards.
Mm.
Before his time, you put the orchestra and the opera in front of everyone, and that was it. But he had his own orchestral hall to work with. He put this moat around the seating area, and the orchestra was in there, so the sound actually came out around the audience, a surround sound, which I think is just incredible. Just to give you an idea of what kind of ingenuity comes with you doing the work yourself, doing it by hand from scratch. This is what can happen. You can change the history of whatever medium you're working in. Till the Fat Lady Sings, the big huge opera singer with the barbarian horns. That's where all this comes from. So if you don't mind, give me a second. I want to read a paragraph from this book that I found to be totally pertinent to everything we discussed and everything we're about to discuss with this ABC article. I do have some images to show of that too, so don't worry about that. But this is October 26, 1849. Richard Wagner, Das Kunstwerk der Zukunft. I apologize for anyone German if I'm blowing that. The artwork of the future. Man will never be that which he can and should be until his life is a true mirror of nature, a conscious following of the only real necessity, the inner natural necessity, and is no longer held in subjugation to an outer artificial counterfeit, which is thus no necessary, but an arbitrary power. Then first will man become a living man, whereas till now he carries on a mere existence, dictated by the maxims of this or that religion, nationality, or state. In like manner, will art not be the thing she can and should be until she is or can be the true conscious image and exponent of the real man, and of man's genuine, nature-bidden life, until she therefore needs no longer borrow the conditions of her being from the errors, perversities, and unnatural distortions of our modern life.
Mm.
So again, I know I had maybe you had a chance to see it. I had sent it to you earlier than this. I'm not just surprising him with this big paragraph, but I really felt it. I really felt this. It's missing nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because of things like this. We're being detached from the natural world at every moment, everywhere we look, and this speaks to, again, the opposite. We're getting a lot of inversions lately in our world and our culture. Your show, you you teach so much in a small amount of time. And inversion is the nature of the way symbology works in a certain way, especially when you try to see it from the point of view that it's meant to. And
Hmm.
what does this evoke in you? Speaking at from an artist, what does this bring out of you?
Yeah, I mean, what it makes me think of is, just the journey of self, the inner journey, and what that represents, and how beneficial it is, and how I think that that's kind of what we're supposed to do here is understand self. And it goes back to the old adage, know thyself and you'll know the universe.
Mm,
And arguably, we live in the age of distraction. There are so many distractions. And I also think we kind of live in the age of addiction, maybe
yeah,
even tech addiction and things like that. And to me, when I hear people talk about addiction, the word that comes to my mind almost immediately is avoidance of self.
mm,
That I think that's really what addictions are all about, is a way to avoid self. So whether it's through drugs or sex or whatever it might be, video games or what have you, it's basically a means to avoid doing that inner work, doing that personal work, and it's a way for you to ignore, all the things that are kind of happening within you, I would say. And so I think AI and technology, it has this, it basically it kind of helps that cause of avoiding self, I think, in a lot of ways. So if you're only making AI art, as an example, if that's the only world is making
right,
AI art, and the artists that you appreciate or like are AI artists, and that's kind of your world, I think that you're unfortunately kind of robbing yourself of opportunities to discover your true north or your true authenticity. So I think that's kind of what being creative is all about, and kind of flexing that creative muscle
right,
and creating artwork and seeing what you're actually capable of doing, and maybe wanting to hone your skill or become better at your craft or whatever. It's kind of like, it's therapeutic, as I was saying earlier, but it's kind of like food for the soul sort of thing. And so that's what I see with a lot of this technology, is just you're constantly looking for external validation. You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely,
You might be looking for some sort of messiah or scapegoat or whatever. It's basically, it's taking you away from self. And so that's kind of one of the larger things that I feel like is appropriate to talk about with all this stuff, is not being tapped into, your own personal journey and what that's all about and where you're currently at. And so then, as I was saying earlier, with the mental health issues and stuff, it makes a lot
right,
of sense that people would be, having these types of inner conflicts, because they're spending all their time looking at other people's videos, other people's artwork. They're just scrolling, and they're never actually truly reflecting, I don't think.
right. Other people's vacations on top of everything
That's
else.
right.
Yeah, and it is very
Exactly.
depressing. Of course, it's depressing.
Yeah.
And you can go on vacations also, but you're not doing that one at that time, and then you're like, oh, I'm stuck here. You don't think about your whole life that you have around you. And really beautifully said, because a lot of people, they do come home and go straight to sports or video games, and the family's right there, maybe even in the same room, but they're doing their own thing. And not only is it out of themselves, but it's out of their own family. And
Yeah.
this is a big dividing factor for a lot of people, and it leads to depression and other things, the other D's, divorce, death. It's very unfortunate that it
That's right.
happens, and you can only be lucky if you get out of it in time. I thought COVID was going to kick everyone out of it, but more people are watching and betting on sports than ever, and video games are still thriving pretty well. And that's there's good in all of this.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can't, if you're at the Thanksgiving dinner and the football's on the TV, you don't tell everyone turn this off. It's not That's not the point of any of this. This is about finding yourself, and if you think you can't or you don't have time for it, then maybe one of these addictions has to be removed from your life. It'll
Hmm.
probably make a very huge impact on how much time you have every week besides a job, work-life balance. We're talking about work-life balance here.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You probably already know this, but I heard someone the other day talk about how people are now watching movies and how they're now watching
Mhm.
Netflix and stuff.
Right,
Obviously more people than ever are watching at home. They're choosing to watch things at home instead of going to the theater.
right,
And people are cutting the cord, so they actually don't have real cable TV anymore. It's all YouTube or whatever, Netflix and what have you. But people are now, what the guy was saying is that people will turn on a movie and then they're also on their phone. And
Uh-huh.
then they're scrolling on their phone, and then when they find something more interesting on their phone, they pause the movie or just stop the movie entirely, and then they go down the
Right.
rabbit hole of what's on their phone. So it's no longer enough for people to have one gigantic screen in front of them. They need to have a second screen there to keep them occupied. And this is part of the quickening too. People's attention spans obviously are getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So the reward kind of is like creating a piece of art that maybe took an afternoon or all day or a week
Right.
or a month. You know what I mean? There's something very rewarding about seeing it all the way through and kind of having that whole entire journey of pre-production, production, post-production. And people are kind of being robbed of that journey or experience too if they're only going to create AI art, which I could see happening in the future. But I think that essentially the powers that should not be, if you want to call them that, the technocracy or whatever you want to say, I really truly feel as though they don't really care what you're consuming online, so long as you're glued to that screen. So long as you're glued to a screen, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And so I see this as almost like the screen is, my understanding is the first original screen was designed as like a spirit box sort of thing as they
Oh
were
yes, I
trying to
heard that.
communicate with the other side. And then it developed into being a functional television that you can send signals to. And if
Right.
you just look at the trajectory of the screen too, it really blows your mind, dude. So just think about it. It's like I believe it's the late 40s and the 50s. That's when people really started getting a lot of televisions, in the
Right.
house
In the
and
house.
everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
In the 60s, it became really common. It just got more and more and more common. But it's fascinating. You used to see moving imagery, on a projected screen, at
Right.
a theater or something like that. And it was across the room. And then those screens got larger. And then now they're in your home and they're across the living room. And then those screens got bigger and bigger and bigger. And
Right.
then we got the personal computer. So now the screen isn't across the room, it's on your desk. And then those screens got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then our phones, got screens
Yep.
obviously at some point, and now we're just putting it right to our face. And
Right.
obviously with virtual reality and things like that, I just see the screen having gone from being across the room in a theater, getting closer and closer and closer to you, and now being right in front of your face. And then now people voluntarily wearing goggles so that
Right.
the screen completely envelops their whole entire vision. So
Sure.
literally they want to be in that world. And I think if you just take this idea even further, what it says to me is that technology wants to bond with us. Technology wants to be within us,
Right.
just like these chips that people are talking about,
Oh, of
with
course. Yeah.
Elon
The
Musk and everything
singularity.
else.
This is the
Yeah.
singularity that they're
Yep.
looking for.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course. I just did an episode on the brain chips. It's pretty scary, that people are willing to, you have to open up your head. You're getting inside your skull to do this, to touch your brain. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be problems. And
Right.
that's just that's the, that's the easy stuff. There's more. There's more to the story, but really well said again. Really, I picture the old. Let's just go with 1900. You ride down the street. There's families in their backyards. There's families outside. Suddenly, it's 1970, and you're riding your bike down the street, and all you see is the glow of televisions through windows, and nobody's outside.
Mm.
And all their information is funneled through there too, especially when there were less channels. Everyone
Mm.
knew the same thing. The sky is the only thing that everyone can see simultaneously. And now with the TV, everyone can watch the same thing from miles away if they're in their living room watching the TV. And that's not good. The lack of variety is a big danger on top of everything else. It's pretty scary.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's really fascinating. The metaphor I always used to kind of like sit on and think about is the idea of a central hearth in your
Right.
home. And
Right.
even just like a simple primitive hut,
Yeah.
or some sort of basic structure where you have the hearth in the middle, you have the fire in the middle, you cooked on that fire, and then you have this central hole, above the structure,
Right.
and how that was like the center of like your home, very
Right.
strategically too, by the way. I was just reading about this and I've talked about it recently on a few different podcasts, but this was a sacred thing, and so looking at fire with your family and telling stories, having some sort of oral tradition or history that you would pass on to people. Like this was where everything was at,
Right. Right.
and it was the center of life because it provided warmth and like all of these different things. Um, and then I think that the hearth kind of was replaced with the television,
Yeah.
and so now that is kind of like it's a different sort of ball game, right? It's
No,
different kind of
great point.
light, everything else. But I really feel like on like a very deep sort of like subconscious level, that's kind of what we're interfacing with. Our ancestors looked at fire and they saw all of these mystical things, all of these very interesting things that are very important to our psychology. And now
Right.
we've replaced it with, what I kind of call all the time monoliths. I think this is kind
Yeah.
of like the symbolic monolith from 2001. It's
It
this right.
is. You're right. When it's off, it's the Black Mirror, as I'm sure
Yeah.
people know that show.
Yeah.
I didn't see it, but I know what it's all about. I've seen the things that it's talked about.
Sure.
You're right about that, and it has a flickering of sorts, depending on what you're watching too. So it really is potentially made to imitate in a certain way. And why wouldn't it be? If you have this symbolic spiritual history of sitting amongst a flame, and then the TV comes in, it almost feels natural. It always feels natural. It never is, but because people grow up with things, that is what's natural. And now, like you said, they're growing up with cell phones, so that's natural, and it's anything but, you know. So let's break off into this article now that inspired everything, because it's
Yeah.
bringing up some interesting ideas for me. And here is potentially the face of the future. Here we have this character named Loab, Loab. They're calling it a cryptid. That's something like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. I don't think that's what this is. We're seeing it. We can reproduce it, apparently. And a lot of interesting adjectives get put on this thing, the unknowable, unimaginable future of AI art. And there's this Atlantic article that said, Loab is a form of expression that has never existed before. And what is it? Generated by accident, in quotes, in my opinion, by this person, Super Composite, Steph Swanson from Uppsala, Sweden. And this was discovered in April 2022 by a 31-year-old. I think that might be part of the story that helps us not feel like it's some random teenager, messing around with, because this, again, we're just typing words in a box. That's where all of this comes from. And so the bottom line is this: they're using a specialized version of finding images called negative weight prompts, where you ask the prompt to actually find the opposite of what you're writing. Here's another image of Loab here. You'll start to see that her face is pretty much always there. This essentially takes away the idea that it's random AI, I imagine, but maybe it doesn't. And so, like I said, this person was working with negative weight prompts, and what Super Composite did is it asked for the opposite of Marlon Brando, the actor from back in the day.
Yeah.
And Rebel Without a Cause, I think. And this is what we get. We get this business card looking thing. So then they asked for the opposite of that, and Loeb appeared. And Loeb kept appearing. They called it a dominant gene. And before we get in deeper with it, where is this coming from? And by the way, negative weight prompts, this is a requested inversion. It's meant to be an inversion, which is already something right there. What do you make of all this?
Oh man, I think it's fascinating. I think it's really interesting this phenomenon is even occurring. I'm kind of not surprised in a lot of ways, but
Right.
it makes me wonder, if there's a way to put in, memes and subliminal imagery and kind of trigger images and stuff in,
Wow.
some of these generated images. And
Right.
so is this truly random? Is this actually kind of like an organic sort of thing based on how AI works, or is there something maybe going on beyond that? It makes me think that when I first read that article, I started thinking about because they associate her with death and gore,
Right.
and I can't remember what they said specifically about her being a mother, correct?
Yeah, the mother archetype. They actually use that term.
Yeah, right. And so I thought of the symbolism of the mother of monstrosities or the mother of abominations. And it just kind of got me going in that direction. And so there are several goddesses, I guess you could say, that fit within this category. Tiamat is one of them. Angerboda is one of them from the Norse pantheon.
Right.
The Scarlet Woman or Whore of Babylon is also one of them. And it's this idea that there is a primordial sort of mother. Oftentimes, she's related to the serpent or the dragon or the hippopotamus. It's a very interesting history that I'm reading about right now. So it's just kind of on my mind.
Oh, wow.
But the idea is that she produces monstrosities. Sophia from Gnosticism is very much like this. She gives birth to the
Right.
demiurge, the
Right.
lion-headed serpent. So it just makes me wonder, is this somehow an expression of this general idea? I don't know. I'm just spitballing over here, but it also makes me
No,
think
it's
about egregores and entities and
right.
demons and things like that. And what really is the relationship between these sorts of things and technology? If television started off as being a medium to communicate with the other side,
Right.
if it was
Right.
a spirit box, what is going on with all of this other stuff? I don't
Yeah.
say I don't claim to have all the answers, essentially, but it just gets my mind going in these sorts of directions. So those are my 2 cents quickly.
Definitely, definitely, and because that dominant gene was actually a quote from this article, and they said mother archetype. One of the you know typical ways to classify it is stubborn. You have to be stubborn as a mom, of course you do, and that's the idea of this dominant gene. Just keeps reading. And we'll show you some more images soon. There's tons of these lobe images. They kept appearing, and they said this shouldn't be happening. AI art isn't supposed to give me the same thing. How is this happening? It's weirding me out. That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
one person was commenting to the super composite person said, "Don't mess with demons, or you will be punished by God." And maybe it's the
Mm,
opposite or the inversion of the story of Job, which sounds like Loeb. We can talk about that maybe in a minute. But you had mentioned the demiurge. That's
mhm,
interesting because the demiurge was able to create people but not give them life. And perhaps
mm,
that's exactly what AI is AI art. I mean,
mhm.
where it's
Right.
just this lifeless thing that's coming from your texts. How sterile is a text box? It's one of the most sterile things ever, in my opinion. And
Right.
that's a small factor, perhaps. And
Absolutely.
they maybe they relied on this. They gave her a chance to speak. Now, again, I'm as I'm reading this article, I keep thinking that this is must be made or something because I can't see this being just all a bunch of random coincidental things that are happening. But they use this GPT-3 speech converter, which is just like Dr. Spatzo. If anyone used that back in the day, you type in, it speaks back in a very robotic voice. I'm sure it's much better technology now. And they got her to talk. And it said, "Oh, I don't want to be represented like this. I'm just a nice person. Maybe I am a mother, but all this gore is just because I have a lot of like scary thoughts about
Mm,
the future of my children and all this other stuff." And there's a whole story now with this Loeb character. It seems like it is a story. I'm sure it did well for super composite. If that person made this up, good job, because it worked. They really got the bandwagon. All the people are interviewing her. She was on Rolling Stone, or he.
mm,
I'm not sure actually if it's a woman or a man. I'm sorry. But then so the story doesn't necessarily end there. They super composite then combined Loeb at request of a glass tunnel surrounded by angels in the style of Wes Anderson, who was, like you were mentioning earlier, is the director's styles, right? So
yeah.
you can do that. So this is what ended up happening. We got Loeb, but she's covered in gore. We don't know if she did anything or if something happened near her. It
Mm,
doesn't say that she killed anything, but it looks interesting to say the very least. On the left, we have that kind of butcher's rubber outfit, right, to prevent you from getting all gored up as you slaughter things. So that's a
mm,
potential with that right there.
yeah.
And then I got one more image to show about what happened once we combined with Wes Anderson, who doesn't have violent movies like this at all, but maybe the style is a little more of a clearer, more of a
Mm,
clean looking representation here.
mhm.
And here we see, it's nightmare fuel, whatever. If you're used to horror movies, it's no big deal. But something we ended up when we were chatting the other day, I was thinking out loud that Wes Anderson, why Wes Anderson? It doesn't seem to be a very violent thing at all in his movies that I've seen. But Wes Craven is a horror director. Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, Last House on the Left, a bunch of other ones. So
Mhm.
is it possible that the AI kind of went to the wrong Wes and gave them all this violence as a result. It could be one of the faults of AI art that it doesn't
Right.
exactly get it perfect.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Crazy.
exactly. When are we going to get our first AI movie? I could see that
Full length
happening
feature
sooner than
film,
later.
right? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh
exactly.
yeah.
From, the script to everything. And so I think that's probably coming.
You're right. And deep fake all the actors that you want. It doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
And this super composite said, I have an easier time reproducing this lobe than celebrities in the AI art. How is that even possible? The data dump for celebrity images should be limitless. And this
Right.
lobe shouldn't have much information at all online. So that might
Yeah.
come to another thing you had mentioned is that where is it grabbing this info from? Is it the whole internet? Or are there certain things? I believe you mentioned them as data packets. And you
Yeah.
had also talked about, I'd love for you to remind or tell the audience about, does it matter what IP address you use? You
Yeah.
were saying
Yeah.
that
Right.
TikTok works differently in China than it does here. I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's something to that.
Yeah, right. So if people have ever been on TikTok, you'll know that it's very addictive and you just scroll and scroll and scroll and there's video after video after video. It's all algorithm based. And that's kind of actually part of the conversation is just the algorithm takeover with everything. So social media used to be like if I followed George on social media, I would see all of his posts regardless because I'm following
Right.
him.
Right.
Now what's happening in large part because of TikTok, but I just think everything's going there. And so now Instagram is following suit. I think Facebook is following suit. So Meta's following suit. And I think all of the social media, probably platforms of the future, are probably going to do something very similar in that now it doesn't matter who you follow. So if I follow you, if the algorithm doesn't like your post for whatever reason, if it's not popular enough or interesting enough, I just am not going to see it. And so following somebody on social media means something now that it didn't mean years ago.
Mm,
And so the
right.
algorithm chooses what you see. And the most popular feature on TikTok is literally just your For You page. And so that means that the algorithm
Nice.
knows what kinds of videos you like. And
Right.
so it's choosing videos that they think you're going to find interesting. And you may not know who any of these creators are at all.
Yeah.
And that's the goal is to feed you new stuff. And so that you're constantly entertained. So you're constantly glued to the app and everything else. So the algorithm chooses all of that stuff for you.
Wow.
Now in China, the algorithm is basically saying, hey, let's give the youth of China, who's probably mostly on TikTok versus,
Right.
probably the older generations, let's give them things that are actually going to educate them, make them more patriotic, make them think that, China is the greatest country in the world, things
Right.
like that. So it's very tailored towards that. Here in the US, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of trash, on TikTok.
Right.
And
That
so there's
definitely
just
is.
lots of low hanging fruit. And so that's what the youth of America, that's what they're seeing, So if you just get on it, you're going to be fed all of this information. So whether you live in China or you live in the US, it's the same app technically, but you're going to see radically different videos and content. It's going to be pushed to you in different ways. And so it's been said that China is obviously clearly well aware of this and
Right.
that it's kind of like this Trojan horse sort of thing where they're intentionally pushing this garbage media on the youth over here. And then for their children, they're getting lots of different types of content that's actually going to potentially benefit them or at least benefit the country, I'll say.
Right. Or at
And
least a slightly polar opposite for the most part than ours.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. Right. Benefit. So I should be doing lots of air quotes over here, but
But
um,
so we have the inversion of TikTok here then, I assume, in a
yeah,
certain way,
yeah.
in a certain way.
Right. So it just makes me wonder, with AI art as an example, are there going to be different guardrails if you live here versus you live in, South America or China or Europe or something like that?
Mm,
Because that's just kind of the deal now. Yeah,
right.
it's really fascinating to me actually. So it's like every single country really has their own parameters of like, yes, you guys can use Netflix. No, this country does not have Netflix. You can buy this movie. No, you can't have it here. There's all these different permissions and there's copyright stuff and things like
Right.
that. So depending on the country, unless you're using some sort of I don't know, VPN sort of thing or
Right.
Tor sort of browser thing or whatever, there's going to be guardrails on what you can access. So it just makes me wonder if there's going to be any kind of guardrails with AI, which actually is the perfect segue to talk about one of the things that I find to be, a tad bit disturbing if this is how things are just going to be down the road.
Right.
But I was unaware until I started using Midjourney, one of the apps out there, that there are banned words. And so I can't even remember what the word was, but it says you cannot use this word.
Oh,
And
you tried using one and it said no?
it said no. And I'm
Oh,
like, well, what other banned words are there? So I
right.
found a list of banned words, and some of them are kind of obvious, but they have a whole big long laundry list of banned words. So I thought it was really interesting that you basically can't create nudity on these apps. You are not allowed to generate nude imagery. And if you look at art history, it's completely chock full of nudes. If you look at
Yes, yes.
mythology or whatever, and you're looking into mythological statues and works of art and everything else, you're going to see lots of nude figures.
Right.
And so it's like, where's the world going to be if most people start using AI generated art to create things, but there's all of these guardrails put up that you can't even create nude images or whatever. So to me, that's an issue. The fact that you just can't put anything into these prompts. And as always, they say that it's for the community.
Right.
You know what I mean? Community standards and everything else.
That's the
And
Trojan
so
horse. Yep.
exactly right. So it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, you know.
Yeah, and Midjourney's founder is damn good at it, man. He's ex-NASA researcher. He's got no problem with the future of AI. He wants to combine it with VR headsets. I mean, clearly, he wants to expand the potential of the human species. We've heard that before. It's a scary thing to hear, man.
That's right, dude. Exactly. When I was listening to these guys talk about some of this stuff, I guess I wasn't that surprised to hear it, but I'm like, well, here we go. This is just another example of this. But they were saying that these programmers and perhaps this guy that you brought up, that they don't really look at AI art as like any kind of end game. This is just a stepping stone. So if
Right.
AI is going to be truly robust and complex and be able to have like actual real original thoughts, then at the very least it needs to be able to create artwork or create these AI environments or whatever. So they look at this as a stepping stone. This is just one step towards like greater, larger goals.
Right.
And the fellow said that these guys aren't even interested in making a profit right now because their end goal is to create a utopia. And so to me,
There it is.
that is, if you hear somebody talking like that, it should send up red flags, immediately. And so to me, that was kind of disturbing to hear that, although I guess I'm not surprised. But there's a lot of people who think that utopia will come with AI, with more technology, with brain chips, all these different types of things. So this is a whole philosophy. When you talk to these programmers, you mentioned Ray Kurzweil and things like that. It's like it comes with this whole entire framework, this whole entire perspective of no, we need this and it's going to be great. What don't you want to think 5 times faster than what you're currently thinking?
Right.
Or don't you want things to be, happen at a more expedited rate than what they currently are going at or whatever? And so it's like, but at what cost, right? Always.
Of course. No, always. And you're reminding me now that I wasn't sure if I was going to show it, but even if you don't think these companies are interlocked, and they all are, of course they are, take a look at these 3 logos real quick. Here is, and I'm sure you've made a logo in your life. Here's Neuralink. Hold on. Here's Meta. It's similar enough. I'm not saying they're exact, but obviously we're looking at some similar device here. And then I was very surprised to find out that when I was looking at this ABC article, that ABC News has even changed it. I had no idea, dude. So clearly there's a similarity even in their logos.
Yeah.
So, and that means there's a similarity in their logos. They have these ideas. They want to push certain images for certain reasons. We could talk about it for hours, but how interesting is that? That a company ABC would change their logo to that. I mean, come on. There's a lot of reasons for these things. It shouldn't just happen and then you idly forget about it and you move on. There's no way to say sorry for the things they've already done, and it's only getting worse. And there's already this low level of public trust and information integrity. This is actually from the article. Maybe integrity will disintegrate altogether, or at least our perception of it. Can we not trust even one article that it wasn't created by an AI bot or any image? anything can happen. If they want to bring some guy down, they can just produce a deep fake video of him doing something terrible. And the whole
Yeah,
thing could be AI generated at this point, because like you said, I'm sure their technology is better than ours, and anything goes. Anything goes.
yeah,
We're already kind of over the hump as far as that goes. Once the screen is on, whether you're watching news or movies, whatever's going on behind the camera, you don't see any of it. Whatever's right off the shot, you don't see it. You're not seeing what I'm surrounded by books and paper, right? You don't see any of it. You just get what I'm want you to see. And it's like that with news as well. It's
absolutely.
worth mentioning right now.
Wag the Dog. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Yes.
It's great.
I saw it. It was like 20 years old now, right? I saw it when it came out, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Excellent. So yeah, Wag the Dog on steroids with AI.
Right. Is it older? It might even be older. It might be like 22 years old or more. Oh, geez.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Holy crap, man. Yes.
But there's a race going on right now. That was another thing that kind of was brought to my attention, that there's a race, at least amongst these people who are creating these apps and everything else, to create the most sophisticated AI, the best AI. And it's growing in leaps and bounds. I don't claim to know what their development history looks like or who's actually doing these things. Right. That's the other thing. I'm very skeptical on where this technology is even coming from. Are there actually, is it coming from real people in Silicon Valley and around the country, and they're on their laptops and they're just programming and coding? Or is it coming from another source, a deep state sort of source or whatever? I'm not sure. I don't really know. It would not surprise me at all. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that one of these programmers said that it's basically our duty to create this. We have to create this. We have to keep on going, even though it might be an invasion of your privacy. And even though there might be all of these different things that people aren't necessarily stoked about, we have to do this because, and this is what this fellow was saying, because if we don't do it, Russia and China is going to get ahead of the curve, and they're going to develop the best AI. So I'm like, dude, is this a new space race, right?
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Is this like a new Cold War sort of space race between the US, Russia, and China? Or is that the narrative that they're putting out, right? And so I just think it's fascinating, because that's what some people were saying about, the American space program, essentially. And we're going back to 2001, A Space Odyssey, which was released in 1968 with this AI. And the sentiment was, if we don't go first, they're going to go. And that's going to be terrible. So we now have to be at the forefront of all of this technology and just develop it because it's coming, So I just thought that was a really interesting thing. I wasn't expecting that some sort of geopolitical angle was going to be brought into the fold with the development of all of these apps. So, yeah. So some people are looking at it on that level.
Great that you said that, really. And that's a good way to kind of taper out of this, because that's everything I'm trying to do on this show, is bring attention and awareness to things that are right in front of your face. It's always right there for you to see. But as soon as this particular thing, this lobe, this apparent self-proclaimed cryptid shows up in all the major news outlets, they want you to, I'm not saying that they want the imagery to strike you, but they want you to know that AI art is a thing and that you need to get on, because it's a brand new burgeoning thing that you've got to try it. If you have a phone in your hands, you might as well do this too. And don't forget, there's a sign up, and a lot of them cost money too, and that's okay, whatever. But it could be like anything. Sure, you will make AI app, but it's probably not most of them, especially after reading this article, talking about all kinds of things about losing integrity in news, and comparing it to the space race like you did. I see all the parallels. It's the same story retold over and over again, like any myth. And I bet if we really dug into every word that's been said about Loeb so far, we'd find a myth word for word in there. We almost did. We were talking about the demiurge. We had all kinds of stuff happening, and the relations are actually pretty accurate. I don't think it's far-fetched to say half the things we said. That's an incredibly prescient way to look at where this is going. And just remember that it could lead to anything like an everything app, or whatever they want to push on you. If you think that every tweet from Elon Musk, Donald Trump, whoever is actually them, I'm here to tell you that I don't really think that there's a good chance. They either have somebody doing it, or it's just an AI bot. If an AI bot looked at the news for an entire week, it could make the perfect provocative Donald Trump quote to piss everyone off. It could do it easy. That's easy.
Exactly. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
just text with an image. You just see his face and it's him. It means nothing, And speaking of apps, there's some pretty big changes coming. YouTube might be getting rid of thumbnails to be more like TikTok, just in time for TikTok to get eradicated here, like they've tried before. Twitter said you can't link anything to other websites from now on or apps. So you can't really promote yourself. And it's just what you said. When I put a link to my newest episode on Facebook, nobody sees it. I've got over 2,000 friends. Nobody sees it.
Yeah.
And if I just put the image and then mention what it is, and I don't put any links, more people end up seeing it. The algorithm is there.
Yep. Yeah.
So we
that's
can't
right.
use these things like we used to as creators. So that's why things like Rockfin really matter. Rockfin is holding the torch in a certain regard, and we got to be happy about that. It's worth mentioning that we're both on Rockfin.
Sure.
And, like I said at the beginning, like, subscribe, share, and get on Rockfin, because places like YouTube and TikTok and other things, they might not even be here, or they might be completely different than they are now. What you said about TikTok is incredible. Even if you have your subscriber list, that's not what you primarily see anymore. You're just doom scrolling and you get whatever you get. That's incredible. That's another reason to jump on. And you know what? If you can't, at least share this conversation, and definitely check out what Mario's doing. I think you will learn so much every single time you press play on those short videos he's got. It's awesome stuff. So,
right on. Thank you,
having said all that, of course, you're an awesome dude, man. And you said some very important things that are very impactful for the future of mankind. And I don't think exaggerating saying that. You said important. Awesome that we got it. For everyone to see here. So why don't we leave this where it is? You produce any final thoughts you have about this in any direction, and then let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say that, I just don't think that there's any way that this isn't being used to some degree for culture creation purposes, and I just think that it's worth being skeptical over this technology. It's worth kind of maybe following where it's going to be going. And I think maybe we'll see, perhaps in 6 months or 8 months or something, we can do an update and see where it's headed, because even from 4 months ago, it has changed a lot, actually.
Good point.
And so I wouldn't mind just kind of keeping tabs and seeing what's going on. I don't know if it's going to be my every day, every week sort of thing, but I am very curious to see where it's headed. So thank you for the invite and just prompting the conversation. You can find me once again at symbolicstudies.com. I'm all over the place, but this was really fun, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, same here. I really appreciate your time, and I think that everyone really got a lot out of it. And if they didn't know you, they're going to love you from now on, I promise. So go find Mario, and thank you so much, guys. A lot more coming before the year's over, and 2023 is looking pretty awesome. And yeah, we'll do that collab again on this exact topic. I think that's a really good idea. It's only growing now.
Excellent. Sounds good.
All right, man. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you real soon.